1993. Bill Clinton was inaugurated as the 42nd President of the United States. In the television industry, the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers swept the nation. Other popular programs premiered, such as Animaniacs, Legends of the Hidden Temple, Boy Meets World, and Rocko's Modern Life, as well as the Sonic the Hedgehog cartoons. The film industry gave us box office hits such as Cool Runnings, Mrs. Doubtfire, Philadelphia, and Jurassic Park, as well as the live-action Super Mario Bros. Movie, which flopped.
Trust the fungus.
In the video game industry, Konami released Castlevania Rondo of Blood for the PC Engine Super CD ROM-ROM. Software Toolworks released a series of educational Mario games. Capcom released the first installment of Mega Man X in Japan for the Super Famicom, as well as Super Street Fighter II in arcades all over. Midway released the first NBA Jam to arcades. Sega released Sonic Chaos for the Game Gear, Sonic Spinball and Dr. Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine for the Genesis, and Sonic CD for the Sega CD.
Sonic the Hedgehog CD from Mega CD.
Sonic Chaos also saw a release in Europe on the Master System that year. Sega also released a second model of the Mega Drive/Genesis. Atari released the 64-bit Jaguar. The 32-bit CD-based 3DO interactive multiplayer was also released. Nintendo released The Legend of Zelda: Link's Awakening for the Game Boy, Star Fox for the Super Nintendo, and Kirby's Adventure for the Nintendo Entertainment System. A massive platformer to show that there was still life left in Nintendo's 8-bit hardware. But for those moving on to or just getting their start with the 16-bit era, or newcomers to the Super Mario franchise, Nintendo had to come up with a way to bring their flagship mascot's classic games to their 16-bit system. To that end, they released Super Mario Collection, also known as Super Mario All-Stars. It was a massive compilation of 4 8-bit Mario titles, all remade with a 16-bit paint job. When it hit North America, gamers finally got to experience for themselves a super challenging Mario game that never got released on the NES. Tonight on Gaming Delight's Chronicles of Mario EXTRA, we take a look back at one of the greatest video game compilations of all time, Super Mario All-Stars. In order to get a better view of Super Mario All-Stars, first we have to look at the Mario games that came before. In September of 1985, Nintendo released the original Super Mario Bros. For the family computer, aka the Famicom. By 1986, the game sold over 3 million copies in Japan, and sales of the Famicom skyrocketed to over 6 million units. In North America, Super Mario Bros. Was released as a launch title for the North American version of the Famicom, the Nintendo Entertainment System. For the first few months, the NES and its games were only available in New York and New Jersey. When Nintendo of America started shipping the system nationwide in the summer of 1986, they bundled Super Mario Bros. With the NES in a package known as the Control Deck. Mainly because of this, sales surged throughout the 80s and going into the early 90s. Super Mario Bros. Would eventually wind up selling over 40 million copies for the NES and Famicom all over the world, making it the 8-bit console's best-selling game. Back in Japan, in February of 1986, Nintendo re-released the game as a launch title for the Famicom Disk System, an add-on for the Famicom that played games using inexpensive proprietary floppy disks. They also ported the game as a Versus System arcade game, Versus Super Mario Bros. The only difference from the original game, stages were redesigned to be more difficult so as to take in extra quarters. The newly designed stages ultimately led to the development of Super Mario Bros. 2 for the disk system. Mario's creator, Shigeru Miyamoto, had given director duties to fellow designer Takashi Tezuka. Miyamoto was focusing on the development of other projects, most notably The Legend of Zelda. But that didn't stop Miyamoto from taking time to make some adjustments. By using the same game engine from the first game and borrowing levels from the Versus System port, the game was completed within 4 months. Super Mario Bros. 2 was released for the Famicom Disk System on June 3, 1986, and became the best-selling game for the add-on, selling over 2 million copies. However, gamers wanted more. Not only was the game extremely similar to the first game, but it was also extremely difficult. Nintendo even slapped a label on the cover, for Super Players. When a copy of Super Mario Bros. 2 was shipped to North America, Howard Phillips, a product analyst for Nintendo of America, balked at how difficult the game was when he tested it out. This was not a fun game to play. This was punishment. Undeserved punishment, he said. And it wasn't just the difficulty. There was also the fact that this sequel was too much like the first game with minimal improvements, and that it would have to be converted into cartridge form. To release the Japanese Super Mario Bros. 2 in North America at a time when the video game industry was just starting to make a comeback would run the risk of turning off potential players. Still, Nintendo of America needed a sequel that anyone could pick up and play. They decided on converting a Famicom Disk System game into a Mario game, Yume Kojo Doki Doki Panic, a game that not only received critical acclaim, but was also made by R&D 4, the same team that worked on the Mario franchise. The game started out as a prototype for a vertical scrolling game developed by Kensuke Tanabe, a graduate of the Osaka University of Arts. The game was reworked into a promotional tie-in with Fuji Television's Yume Kojo, or Dream Factory, Festival, an event that took place in the summer of 1987. The game was a critical success, and it was enough for Nintendo of Japan to send a modified version of the game to North America with the note to replace the Dream Factory characters with characters from the Mario universe. Releasing it that way would avoid any legal issues. R&D 4 then modified Doki Doki Panic and sent it to Nintendo of America for review. This time it was far more forgiving than the Japanese Mario 2. The Mario modified Doki Doki Panic soon became the Western version of Super Mario Bros. 2 and was released in North America in October of 1988. To even greater success than the Japanese version, despite a worldwide shortage of computer chips that made the game hard to come by. Over 7 million copies were sold worldwide, and for quite a while, gamers never discovered the truth about its development. Around the same time, in Japan, Nintendo was preparing for the long-awaited release of a Mario game that would push the Famicom to its limit and hold gamers over for the release of Nintendo's next-gen console. Development started in 1986 after the release of Super Mario Bros. 2. After 2 exhausting years of development, Super Mario Bros. 3 was released in Japan on October 23, 1988. It was 10 times bigger than the first game, released on a 3 megabit cartridge. It became the country's second best-selling game of 1988, just behind Dragon Quest III, and number 1 in 1989. But it would take about a year and a half for the West to receive a release. After all, in North America, Super Mario Bros. 2 was barely new to the NES and was selling well, and the handheld Game Boy was on its way. To release Super Mario Bros. 3 in North America around that time would run the risk of hurting sales of Super Mario Bros. 2 and the Game Boy, but Nintendo of America found ways to hype up its inevitable release. Super Mario Bros. 3 was released on Nintendo's PlayChoice 10 arcade cabinet in the summer of 1989. It was the first time gamers got a chance to play the game. Meanwhile, Nintendo and Universal Pictures collaborated on a film that would hype up the latest Mario game.
Super Mario Brothers 3!
The movie was called The Wizard. It featured pretty much everything Nintendo. The Wizard was released in December of 1989. Despite receiving poor reviews from critics, the movie grossed over $14 million on a $6 million budget. Not only that, but the climactic tournament scene featured Super Mario Bros. 3 as the game played in the final round. 2 months later, on February 12, 1990, Super Mario Bros. 3 was officially released in North America on the Nintendo Entertainment System. Over 17 million copies were sold worldwide, making it the third best-selling NES game of all time, just behind Super Mario Bros. And Duck Hunt. The game established a series of new power-ups such as the Super Leaf and Tanuki Suit, and enemies such as Boom Boom, Thwomps, Chain Chomps, and the Koopalings. But before Mario 3's North American release, Nintendo's Game Boy had launched in Japan and North America with a Mario game among its launch titles, Super Mario Land. It looked like a Mario game, it played like a Mario game, but it was also a very short and simple game, and Luigi, Toad, Princess Toadstool, and Bowser were all absent. Plus, it was the first time Shigeru Miyamoto had no involvement in the development of a Mario game. Despite all this, Super Mario Land managed to sell over 18 million copies worldwide. Shockingly, it even outsold Super Mario Bros. 3. Back in Japan, on November 21st, 1990, Nintendo released the Super Famicom, the 16-bit successor to the Famicom and Nintendo's answer to NEC's PC Engine and Sega's Mega Drive. It launched with two games, F-Zero, a critically acclaimed racing title, and the latest Super Mario game. Super Mario World began development in 1988 as Super Mario Bros. 4. Shigeru Miyamoto served as the producer, while Takashi Tezuka was given director duties. The game was about more than just beating Bowser and saving Princess Peach. It was also about freedom and finding every exit in the game. It also introduced a new character who appealed to women and children, Yoshi. When the Super Famicom and Super Mario World launched in Japan, Nintendo only managed to ship 300,000 console units, a mere fifth of how many pre-orders it got. But thanks in large part to Super Mario World, the Super Famicom was a huge success. Even more so than the competition. Less than a year later, the Super Famicom made its way to North America as the Super Nintendo Entertainment System. Its Japanese launch titles came along with it, as well as Pilot Wings. On August 21st, 1991, nearly 3 weeks ahead of its intended nationwide release date of September 9th, the Super Nintendo hit a limited number of stores. Among the launch titles was its bundled game, Super Mario World. Critics heaped praise upon the game. The game went on to sell over 20 million copies. The success of the Super Mario franchise ultimately spawned an animated series, breakfast cereals, toys, clothing, and so much more. Even a few other video games featuring Mario came about, including the puzzle game Dr. Mario for the NES and Game Boy, Mario Paint, an art program for the Super Nintendo, and Super Mario Kart, a racing title for the same system. Nintendo even released a sequel to Super Mario Land on the Game Boy, Super Mario Land 2: 6 Golden Coins, which marked the debut of Wario. Altogether, the franchise gained more than enough popularity for Nintendo to work on yet another Mario game. There had been rumors of a sequel to Super Mario World, but it wouldn't be ready for a while. Nintendo needed a game to keep fans of the Mario franchise occupied in preparation for their next Mario game. The concept of this new game dates back to 1988, as development of the Super Famicom and Super Mario World began, right after Super Mario Bros. 3 hit store shelves in Japan. Nintendo's R&D 4 team, later known as Nintendo's Entertainment Analysis and Development Group, ported Super Mario Bros. 3 to the new system for a demonstration. Said Miyamoto, "Before starting Super Mario World, we ported Mario 3 to the Super Famicom as a hardware experiment, and even though the colors and sprites were more detailed, it was still the same game. It made me realize that we couldn't just make the same game again. We had to create something new. So it was in that context that we talked about how to make the most use of the new hardware." Miyamoto had seen potential in re-releasing already existing games in the coming years with enhancements. However, Super Mario World took priority. But after completing Super Mario Kart, Miyamoto decided to go back to the idea of reissuing the NES Mario games. If I remember correctly, Miyamoto-san brought it up a little while after development of Super Mario Kart had ended. He wanted to create a value pack combining all the Super Mario series games. I think the idea was to include the Lost Levels, a game not many had played on the disc system, thereby giving people another opportunity to play it, said Tadashi Sukiyama. The concept of releasing multiple old games on a single cartridge wasn't exactly new, not even to Nintendo. In 1988, Nintendo released the NES Action Set, which contained a combo cartridge containing Super Mario Bros. And Duck Hunt. That same year, As a result of the chip shortage, Nintendo of America discontinued individual cartridges of the NES versions of Donkey Kong and Donkey Kong Jr., but re-released the two in a single cartridge as Donkey Kong Classics. In 1989, the NES Power Set was released. The set included a combo cartridge that contained Super Mario Bros., Duck Hunt, and World Class Track Meet. In 1990, a 2-in-1 cartridge containing Super Spike Volleyball and Nintendo World Cup was released as a pack-in title for the NES Sports Set, but none of these combo cartridges were released in Japan. However, in 1983 in Japan, when Sharp released the My Computer C1, a color television with a Famicom built in, it came with a multi-card containing Donkey Kong Jr. and Donkey Kong Jr. Map. It was one of the only two officially licensed multi-card games made for the Famicom in Japan. As for non-Nintendo platforms, in 1986, with the launch of their Master System in North America, Sega released a combo cartridge containing Hang-On and Safari Hunt as the pack-in title with the system, as well as one with Hang-On and Astro Warrior for the base system set. But Nintendo's new set of games wouldn't be simple ports of 8-bit games on the Super Famicom. Instead, they would be remade from the ground up with 16-bit enhancements. Development was handled by Nintendo's Entertainment Analysis and Development Division, run by Shigeru Miyamoto and Takashi Tezuka. Miyamoto served as the game's producer, with Takashi Tezuka as director and Tadashi Sugiyama as assistant director. Sugiyama had been with Nintendo since 1983. His first job was designing graphics for the 1983 Famicom game Baseball. He later designed the Ice Climber characters Popo and Nana, before going on to design characters for Yume Kojo, Doki Doki Panic, and the Western Super Mario Bros. 2. He also served as director for Zelda 2, The Adventure of Link, Pilot Wings, and Super Mario Kart. Handling the programming was Toshihiko Nakago of Systems Research and Development. He had been with Nintendo since 1983, programming various games for home consoles. Composing the soundtrack was not only Mario veteran Koji Kondo, but Soyo Oka, whose earliest claims to fame included Famicom Grand Prix 2, 3D Hot Rally, Versus Excitebike, and Ice Hockey. She would also provide the soundtrack for Super Mario Kart. Nintendo considered her work Soyoism. Together, the team ported all 4 Super Mario games previously released on the Famicom and Famicom Disk System. Super Mario Bros., the Japanese Super Mario Bros. 2, Super Mario Bros. 3, and Super Mario USA. Artist Naoki Mori, who had previously worked on F-Zero, SimCity, Pilot Wings, and Super Mario Kart, designed the backgrounds for the upgraded Super Mario Bros. And Super Mario Bros. 2. Other artists handling graphic design included Shigefumi Hino, Soichiro Tomita, and Kenta Usui. Hino had previously done design work for Super Mario World, as well as Yoshi's Cookie. He had also created Yoshi. Tomita designed objects in The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past. Usui was a newcomer. The compilation went under the working title Mario Extravaganza. The developers added more details to the game's backgrounds. For instance, in the standard overworld of the first Super Mario Bros., clouds have smiling faces on them, never seen in the original game. The same applies to the Japanese Mario 2, which actually introduced the clouds with faces on them in the 8-bit version. Plus, in World 8-3, in the 8-bit version of the first game, the hidden block, if you can call it that, is pretty much camouflaged in the background castle. Not in the 16-bit version. Not only is the castle in the background a completely different color, but the parallax scrolling also makes it impossible for the block to be camouflaged. For the 16-bit version of the Western Mario 2/Mario USA, in some boss stages, there are blocks that resemble NMB blocks, Nintendo's very own Legos in the 1960s. Key rooms also had a giant phantom in the background, which would have intimidating glowing eyes when a player picked up a key. In Mario 3, not much background changes were made, aside from adding more color and parallax scrolling. The black background for the battle mode, however, was given a significant overhaul. They were now more detailed. All of these games were also made a little easier. For one, each was given a save feature and unlimited continues. The original Super Mario Bros. Not only lacked a save feature, but continues as well. That is, unless one put in a code. With this 16-bit remake, it's no longer necessary. Once one's game is over, they can continue from the world in which they lost. The Japanese Mario 2 didn't have an actual save feature, but it did have unlimited continues. But to access worlds A through D, a player would have to beat the game 8 times and hold A plus start on the title screen afterwards. In the remake, not only was a full save feature implemented, but one could pick up from the level they left off, rather than at the start of the world. Plus, players would only have to beat the game once to access worlds A through D. No button presses required. The requirement to beat the game without warping to access the Fantasy World 9 is still there, but instead of just getting 1 life, a player could use all the lives remaining up to that point. But this meant scrapping the 100,000 point bonus for every remaining extra life. The Western Mario 2/Mario USA didn't have a save feature, and there were only 2 continues. The remake not only added the save feature, but also added unlimited continues. Plus, 7s were added to the slot machine. Getting 3 7s gave the player 10 extra lives. The player could also receive 3 extra coins if they hit a cherry in the first slot, and 7s in the other 2. In addition, 2 extra lives were awarded for any 3 matching symbols other than the cherries and 7s instead of 1. Super Mario Bros. 3 also didn't have a save feature, but it too had unlimited continues. The remake added the save feature. In the Japanese Famicom version, if Mario took a hit while powered up, he shrunk down to Small Mario. The remake implemented what had already been in the Western release of the game. When Mario was powered up, he'd stay big when hit. Another difficulty adjustment, all 4 games started the player with 5 lives, more than any of the 8-bit versions had. What's more, in the 8-bit version of the first Super Mario Bros., clearing boss battles didn't award points for the remaining time. The 16-bit version fixes that issue. Music-wise, Koji Kondo and Soyo Oka gave the music a major 16-bit upgrade. The NES and Famicom had 5 electronic sound channels. The Super Famicom and Super Nintendo had 8 dedicated channels, and supported sound effects from numerous instruments. Kondo and Oka also added new music. In the first game and the Japanese Mario 2, the Bowser battles have their own theme in all battles. Except the final boss battle, in which the music is different. The 8-bit versions never had boss music. The title screens of the first game, the Japanese Mario 2 and Mario 3, which were silent in the 8-bit versions, were each given a variation of the underwater stage music, similar to the Western Mario 2/Super Mario USA. With all these changes and so much more, the game was completed. The compilation was given the name Super Mario Collection and was released on July 14, 1993 in Japan at a price of 9,800 yen. Around that time, the 1993 live-action Super Mario Bros. Movie had been out in North America for nearly 2 months. And just 4 days prior to Super Mario Collection's release, the movie hit the big screen in Japan. Promotional materials made references to Mario making it to Hollywood. There was even a commercial in which Mario and his team, as well as Bowser, Wart, Birdo, and the Koopalings, made a red carpet entrance nearly similar to that of the Oscars.
Super Mario Bros. Mario 2, Mario 3, and Super Mario USA 4つのゲームとおまけにニューゲームもついて1つのソフトにスーパーファミコンソフトスーパーマリオコレクション
Super Mario Collection was a critical success. Electronic Gaming Monthly, an American gaming magazine known for reviewing games from Japan, stated, "Old fans will shed tears of nostalgia at the now gorgeously detailed but still recognizable landmarks from the classic 8-bit versions." There are no sales figures available to prove how many copies sold in Japan in its first week. Chances are, this being a Mario game with glowing reviews, quite a lot sold. It ultimately sold over 2.1 million copies in Japan overall. Nintendo knew it was a no-brainer to localize the game for Western gamers. By 1993, in North America, the Super Nintendo Entertainment System was in the midst of an epic battle against Sega's 16-bit Genesis. It was a battle unlike anything ever seen, not only in video games, but in all sorts of pop culture. The Sega Genesis, released in 1989 in North America, had initially sold for $190 and was packaged with Altered Beast. But 2 years later, at the behest of Sega of America President Tom Kalinske in response to the impending release of the Super Nintendo, the Genesis received a price cut to $150, and a new pack-in title, Sonic the Hedgehog. This helped drive already rising sales of Sega's 16-bit hardware even more. The Super Nintendo, released in August of 1991, retailed for $200, twice the price of the Nintendo Entertainment System, and had no backwards compatibility with NES games, much to the chagrin of parents and consumers.
Some parents are refusing to be taken in.
I'm going to say no, and I'm going to explain to him how people market things to make you spend more money.
Why can't you just buy the cassette?
Because it doesn't play in the regular one. You have to buy the super unit.
Who's doing that?
I was going to get it, but I don't want to spend that much money.
He has a Game Boy, and now he has the Nintendo, and now he'd have to have another unit just for that one game. It doesn't seem right.
But Nintendo argued that adding backwards compatibility to the Super Nintendo would have made it even more expensive. And they assured everyone that they were not abandoning the NES just yet. In 1992, the price of the Super Nintendo Superset with Super Mario World was reduced to $150, and Nintendo also released a $100 standalone package with only one controller and no bundled games. Price reductions also hit the original NES. Nintendo released the Challenge Set with Super Mario Bros. 3 as the pack-in title, all for only $90. In response, Sega of America reduced the price of the Genesis to $130 and released a standalone package for $100. By the summer of 1993, more and more gamers had moved on from the NES, despite cool new games for the 8-bit hardware coming out. And it had been almost a year since Sega launched a Sega CD in North America. The peripheral, though expensive, improved the hardware of the Genesis. Its CD-based medium meant bigger games, full motion video, and improved sound effects. Nintendo also made plans to release their own CD-based peripheral, but it never came out. Nintendo's primary hope for success was with its software for the Super Nintendo, the NES, and the Game Boy. Luckily, Nintendo of America had found a way to bring back interest in the original Super Mario games. In the summer of 1993, at the Consumer Electronics Show, Nintendo showed off their upcoming titles. One of them was Super Mario Collection, but under a new name, Super Mario All-Stars. On August 11, 1993, just a month after the Japanese release, Nintendo of America released Super Mario All-Stars.
He's back. series, Mario knows the new and improved Mario and Super Mario All-Stars. So much Mario, it's a Mario smorgasbord. It's all the wigged out Mario Brothers adventures you ever played and then some. But this is juiced up 16-bit only on the Super Nintendo Entertainment System Mario. So it's bigger Mario, better Mario, in your face Mario. It's Raccoon Mario, Mario throwing fireballs, Mario hurling turnips, Mario negotiating an arms deal. Okay, maybe not. It's Mario like you've never seen him. What's 2 plus 2 Mario? What's the capital of Ohio? Mario. You're gonna live, breathe, eat, sleep Mario in Super Mario All-Stars. 4 complete Mario games, including the never-seen lost levels. You can't get more Mario than this, which is why the best played here.
PAL regions would also see a release 4 months later. In the United Kingdom, British actor Rick Mayall showcased the game in commercials.
Super Mario Bros. The Lost Levels is so difficult, it could actually unhinge the balance of your mind.
Aren't you that talentless celebrity women find repellent?
See what I mean? He's completely tonto.
I mean, it's just typical. You can never find a plumber when you need one, then 4 come along at once.
Super Mario All-Stars, an infuriating, innovative Nintendo.
The game opens with silhouettes of the Mario cast chattering until the lights come on. Upon pressing start, you'll be shown the covers of the games. One thing I should know concerning the US version, the cover of the original Super Mario Bros. Is the 1989 reissue, with the newer variant of the Nintendo Seal of Quality. The same applies to Super Mario Bros. 2. Personally, I think they should have used the cover variants with the original seal from when the respective games first launched stateside, but that's just me. Anyway, press start on the game you want to play, and you'll see a drop-down list of 4 save files. You also get to choose from one of 2 controller types by pressing the select button. Now, hearing the music in the title screens makes you wonder why they weren't in the original games in the first place. I understand the cartridge limitations and such, but still, I'm sure a title theme would have done their respective games a wealth of good. And on the subject of music, the fact that they actually added music to the Bowser battles in the original Super Mario Bros. And Lost Levels really made the 2 games fit in with titles like Super Mario World. Even the final boss battles were really something. It's too bad I never got to World 9 during the 90s. I never even heard about it until I happened upon a copy of issue 52 of Nintendo Power at a garage sale. It's a shame I never kept that copy though. Hey, I wasn't subscribed to Nintendo Power until 1999, and even then, it only lasted 4 years. It took almost a decade, but I managed to beat all 4 games in the compilation, even though I had to warp my way to the finish. Super Mario Bros. Was pretty standard. Super Mario Bros. 2, while different from the others, really stood out to me. It was actually the first game in the set I actually beat. Super Mario Bros. 3, while the most fun, took a long while to master. But as for Lost Levels, I think Rick Mayall was right when he said it could unhinge the balance of one's mind with its cruel difficulty. In a way, I did get a little unhinged by this game. My only gripe with this game is that nothing unlocks when you beat all 4 games at least once. Mega Man The Wily Wars has the unlockable Wily Tower for beating all 3 games, and lets you customize Mega Man with power-ups from those 3 games. Actually, I didn't have this gripe back in the 90s or 2000s when I owned my original copy. I just care more about the compilation. Anyway, after I sold my original copy of Super Mario All-Stars, I never got to experience the lost levels again. Until I downloaded the original 8-bit game on the Wii Virtual Console, where I still struggled. I purchased it again on the 3DS Virtual Console in 2016, and there I finally got to play World 9. I also like Worlds A through D, despite the extreme difficulty of C-4, which is nothing short of a frustration tool. It's extremely hard to get past the second corner without losing a power-up. But that's the lost levels for you. Now I understand for sure why the original Japanese Mario 2 never hit the States on the NES. Thank you, Howard Phillips. So overall, Super Mario All-Stars was my first full experience with the original NES Super Mario games, even if they're in 16-bit form. I wouldn't have mastered them on the original hardware if it weren't for this compilation. As stated earlier, the compilation was a major success with critics. In issue 50, Electronic Gaming Monthly rated it 37 out of 40. The reviewer who gave it a perfect 10 stated that All-Stars, quote, blows the roof off of the fun factor. GamePro, in issue 52, gave the game a perfect average score of 5 out of 5, saying it's a Mario lover's dream come true. Pretty much every review all over the world spoke positively of Super Mario All-Stars, though some felt that despite the new 16-bit makeover for the original 8-bit games, and it was a whole new experience mainly for those who didn't own an NES, it was nothing Nintendo hadn't created before. Regardless, Super Mario All-Stars went on to sell over 10 million copies worldwide, making it the second best-selling Super Nintendo game of all time, just behind Super Mario World's 20 million. What helped the collection stand out was that when Western gamers picked up the game, they noticed a game they never played before, Super Mario Bros. The Lost Levels. It was the Japanese Super Mario Bros. 2, the Famicom Disk System game that never got released in North America or Europe. Many gamers, myself included, considered All-Stars their first experience with the game. Super Mario All-Stars graced the cover of issue 52 of Nintendo Power, which featured a strategy guide to getting through each game in the compilation, providing tips for the lost levels, especially a 1-up trick. In that same issue, Nintendo issued a World 9 challenge. If a player sent in proof that they cleared Super Mario Bros., the lost levels, without warping and made it to World 9, postmarked by the end of October of 1993, they received an exclusive iron-on patch. In North America, consumers who recently purchased the Super Nintendo Superset would send proofs of purchase and $3.50 for postage and handling to Nintendo and receive a copy of Super Mario All-Stars. This promotion lasted until the end of May of 1994.
Super Mario World, and for $3.50 in postage, Super Mario All-Stars free with 4 Mario games in one. Mario. So stop by your Nintendo dealer today. When it comes to value, don't forget Super Nintendo Superset.
The game even came bundled with the Super Nintendo in numerous regions. In 1994, Nintendo re-released the game in North America and PAL regions with Super Mario World added to the compilation. The 5-in-1 cartridge was released exclusively as a packing game for the Super Nintendo in North America, while PAL regions also got a standalone cartridge. The cartridge was never released in Japan at all. The success of Super Mario All-Stars most likely led Nintendo to reissue games from some of their franchises, including Super Mario Bros. In May of 1996, Nintendo began reissuing big-selling Super Nintendo and Game Boy games by introducing the Player's Choice label. On September 3rd of that year, Super Mario All-Stars was re-released under that label. After the Super Nintendo was discontinued, so went the compilation. But Nintendo never forgot the concept of reissuing old games on new hardware. Each of the games on the compilation, as well as the compilation itself, were re-released numerous times over the years. The original Super Mario Bros. Got a re-release on the Game Boy Color on May 10, 1999 in North America and Europe. Japan wouldn't get a release of this port until the next year, and only through the Japan-exclusive Nintendo Power distribution service. Super Mario Bros. Deluxe was pretty much the same 8-bit Super Mario Bros., but cropped down to accommodate the Game Boy Color's smaller screen. because of the cropping, players could backtrack a little. Probably the best known improvement is the world map. There's also a challenge mode. And if a player can beat the game with at least 300,000 points, they unlock the lost levels. But only the standard 8 worlds. No World 9, no Worlds 8 through D. In 2001, Nintendo released Super Mario Advance as a launch title for the Game Boy Advance. Super Mario Advance included the 16-bit remake of the Western Super Mario Bros. 2 and a remake of the original Mario Bros. Arcade game. As with every other Super Mario Advance game, the first one inevitably crops down Super Mario Bros. 2 to accommodate the Game Boy Advance's 3x2 screen, but many animations are improved, and it even has a scoring system, which the original lacked. After beating the game, you can go through all the stages again in search of Yoshi eggs. In 2002, Super Mario Advance 2 and 3 were released for the Game Boy Advance. Advance 2 included Super Mario World, with 3 including Super Mario World 2, Yoshi's Island. In 2003, Super Mario Advance 4, Super Mario Bros. 3 was released. The game not only included the 16-bit version of Super Mario Bros. 3, but brand new levels that utilized the GBA e-reader. In 2004, the original Super Mario Bros. Was ported to the Game Boy Advance as part of the Famicom Mini/Classic NES series. The Lost levels also got a GBA release, but only in Japan. After the Classic NES series, it felt like the end of re-releases for the 8 and 16-bit Super Mario games. But in 2006, with the release of the Nintendo Wii and the Virtual Console service, things changed. As the years went on, the original Super Mario games were re-released as downloadable titles for the service. These releases received positive feedback. They were later re-released for the Wii U and 3DS Virtual Consoles, as well as the Nintendo Switch Online service. Even Super Mario Advance 4 found its way to the Wii U Virtual Console and Nintendo Switch Online, with all of the e-reader stages included. In 2010, to commemorate Super Mario Bros. 25th anniversary, Nintendo re-released Super Mario All-Stars, but not on the Virtual Console. Instead, it was released on a physical Wii disc. It came bundled with an audio CD featuring BGMs from numerous Mario titles. In 2016, the port received a standalone re-release as part of the Nintendo Select series of budget Wii games. It was one of the last discs released for the Wii by Nintendo. In 2020, the collection also popped up on the Nintendo Switch Online service. Other Nintendo franchises like Pokemon, The Legend of Zelda, Kirby, Metroid, and even Advance Wars got the remake treatment as well. Some other developers even tried to capitalize on Super Mario All-Stars by releasing compilation remakes of their own. In 1994, Capcom released the first 3 Mega Man games on the Sega Genesis/Mega Drive as Rockman Mega World, aka Mega Man The Wily Wars. Tecmo released ports of the NES Ninja Gaiden games as Ninja Gaiden Trilogy on the Super Nintendo in 1995, with minimal improvements. Even Sega put out their own Sonic compilations. In 1995, in Europe, they released Sonic Compilation on the Mega Drive, which contained Sonic 1 and 2 and Dr. Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine. The compilation was released on the Genesis in North America in 1997, under the name Sonic Classics 3-in-1. Sega also released Sonic Jam in 1997 for the Sega Saturn. The compilation not only consisted of Sonic 1 through 3 and Knuckles, but a 3D overworld. Nintendo wouldn't quite be finished with game compilations. In 1994, they released Tetris and Dr. Mario on the Super Nintendo, obviously consisting of 16-bit remakes of the popular NES/Game Boy puzzle games. In 1997, they released Game & Watch Gallery, a series of Game Boy compilations of ports and remakes of Nintendo's Game & Watch handhelds. 2009 saw the release of Metroid Prime Trilogy, a Wii compilation of the first 3 Metroid Prime games. As for Mario, in 2020, in honor of Super Mario Bros. 35th anniversary, Nintendo released, for a limited time only, Super Mario 3D Collection, or Super Mario 3D All-Stars on the Nintendo Switch. This new compilation consisted of ports of Super Mario 64, Super Mario Sunshine, and Super Mario Galaxy. For over 30 years, Super Mario All-Stars had left a profound impact on the gaming industry. Games of old could actually stay relevant in a whole new generation.
Super Mario All-Stars is quite obviously an extremely impressive package, and the presentation still offers something of a nostalgic thrill. That opening sequence with the Mario cast chatting it up in silhouette is up there with the Super Street Fighter II intro for classic SNES attract modes. But, ultimately, we believe that it only offers the best experience possible with one of its 4 included games. Stuart Gipp, Nintendo Life, 2020.
I owe a great deal to Super Mario All-Stars. Back in 1994, I rented this game at my local rental shop, and I loved it so much that I got it as a gift for my 6th birthday. It became my second favorite Super Nintendo game of all time, just behind Super Mario World. Having 4 games in one cartridge was mind-blowing. Super Mario All-Stars was also a great move to quell the frustration people felt when they found out the Super Nintendo lacked backward compatibility. True, they learned to appreciate what they had anyway, especially with more new games coming out. But once Super Mario All-Stars came out, they most likely began to appreciate the Super Nintendo more than ever. Thanks again for watching Gaming Delight. Until next time, happy gaming!